the second day. Welcome. You are welcome to come more to the front if you feel at any moment to make it a bit cozier, but you're not forced to. Just a suggestion. Again, my name is Oana Ghera. I'm the industry coordinator of European Short Pitch, and together with me today, I'm sorry, my voice is acting up. And together with me today, I have Julian Ross, who is the head of film programming and distribution at iFilm Museum, and Niels Putman, artistic director of Court Film B and editor at Talking Shorts. That it's also a partner of our conversation today, and this conversation will also be recorded and presented online afterwards. And Jade Wiseman, distributor at Videopower. I'm very happy that they joined us today for a conversation about the way the role of shorts is changing in a shifting media landscape. If yesterday we talked specifically about film festivals and how to approach them, today we wanted to start the day by opening up a bit our perspectives and talk about shorts, both in a cinema context but also outside of it, and see how can shorts fit within the film, within the museum and exhibition context, on online distribution context, and so on and so forth. So I would start the conversation by reflecting exactly on that. How do you see curating shorts, in particular, in different spaces, depending on your activity? Because besides the jobs that I announced here, you already have a lot of other experiences in many other situations. So maybe we can start reflecting a bit on that. How do you approach, first of all, curating for cinema in a festival context or otherwise? And then maybe we can move on to other contexts and see the differences. Who wants to open up that?
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I guess for me as a distributor and also with a bit of experience in like curating in festival, it's a bit different because as a distributor, I'm not necessarily the curator, but I'm the one that is kind of the bridge between the filmmaker and the festival or the space or the event or, I don't know, like anybody that wants this film, like museum, gallery. And I think my job is to make sure that the filmmaker is taken care of and protected, because it can be a bit difficult, and also making sure that I ask for money to pay the filmmaker, not for me, of course. So, I mean, it's definitely changed. I think there's a lot more alternative spaces that are cropping up for film. And especially if you work for films that are not traditional or that are not commercial, or that are at the crossroads of art and film, then you can find those more like, I don't know, underground initiative to propagate your work. You can still go through the festivals, that's still the main thing that we do. But we have also a lot of filmmakers that started in the art world and have their own network through that, so we try to also help them do that. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question, actually.
Let's actually open it up in a very important direction, because yeah, this is really much the big topic that we want to reach today, to try to map out the new opportunities that short films have today compared to maybe 30, 40 years ago. And I think, yeah, that's the best things that we should reflect on. And yeah, maybe now I will bring it back to you two, Julian and Niels, because you curate more specifically. So maybe you could try to speak a bit about how do you approach shorts in your curatorial practice? Like, how do you think, what's the difference in your eyes in curating shorts compared to features, for example?
I'll go. Yeah, I try to see myself as some kind of a bit of a versatile programmer in that sense, because I do it in festival contexts for several festivals. I do it for kortfilm.be, which is an online magazine that also has like a carefully curated video on demand catalog, where it's very different, you know, it's the online context where we also connect publications to the online releases. And then I recently, well, it's going to be a year in July, I started working for a repertory cinema in Antwerp called The Cinema, very rarely program shorts, but it does happen. But there it's also, again, a totally different ballgame, because it's more difficult to there develop the audience to even buy a ticket to see a short film screening that is not connected to a festival, that is just, you know, something in its own right. So these are three very different kind of spaces to be curating shorts for. And they come with different struggles. And maybe just to talk about the online aspect of it all for kortfilm.be, how we do it there is currently, we will be expanding on it in 2026. But for now, it's every month we release one Belgian short film, and we ask the best curator, and you've been one of them, to come in and connect this Belgian short film to another short film, thematically or for whatever reason, and then both films get an essay, like a small curatorial text, and then they go online, and then they have a short life, an extra life, a new life maybe. And we collaborate a lot with archives in Belgium, so like the Cinematheque or Museum of Contemporary Art, for instance, where we try to, you know, give a new place for these small films that a lot of people might not have heard of. So it's really about, you know, creating a new life for these films that might have been in the archive for quite a while, which I think is very valuable, and I love it. And I think it's an example of many similar kind of initiatives recently, or for the past few years, that have been popping up for good and maybe less good reasons. But let's try to be positive today. Yeah.
So my relationship with short film, I mean, I've from day one when I was a programmer, I was working with short film, and I still do. Although my work, goes from 1 minute films to hours long films, and in the cinema context, exhibition context, and online. I always say to programmers who want to start programming that short film is definitely the place to start, because I think you can maybe approach a small art space or an organization with an idea for maybe one screening, one program. But you know, it's going to be tough if you're approaching a cinema or an organization with, like, I don't know, a Tarkovsky retrospective or something. That's like a big commitment for an organization to take on for like a starting programmer. And the other reason is, I think you can really, it's a form that allows for a lot of fluidity and dialogue with other types of cinema. I think in terms of filmmaking, it's much more free than studio and industrial kinds of filmmaking. Even the small independent, filmmaking that takes place around the world, it requires a lot of budget. So you're going to have a lot of stakeholders with a lot of say. It's going to be a long process of making that can really kill a project. Whereas a short film, ideally you can go out and do it and shoot it. You have more freedom, and you really see that in the short films that get made. From animation, documentary to fiction, they're a bit more playful, more free, less restricted. And I do think that's why the contemporary art is more friendly to short film than, let's say, feature film, which is a bit more confined to the structures and tradition of cinema narrative. And that's why you see short filmmakers who maybe didn't emerge from an art context, find themselves within an art context. So it has that kind of mobility and fluidity, I think. So it's very disappointing when I hear people speak of short film as this kind of stepping stone into, real filmmaking, because I actually I don't really see that distinction. And when I look for innovation and creativity, I usually find that more in short film. Now the challenge is for us, I guess, to create these opportunities for people to encounter short film, and as it's already been discussed, it's harder than like presenting a feature film, you know, because it's you have to kind of promote a theme or something, and then multiple filmmakers, and because of cinema, the cinema scene, usually it's lesser known filmmakers, because if they're well known, they're not making short film anymore usually. So it's a harder sell for cinemas to kind of invite audiences to, and for audiences, it's a bigger risk for them to come to see short film. But nevertheless, for me, the best ways have been like online. Last night I just watched lecinema.com. There's like a 3-minute film called Hot Ticket. Maybe I don't have time for an hour and a half at the end of the night, but I do have 3 minutes, and I think online platforms should make use of that more. And I hear online platforms do find more success with short film than feature film. So I just don't think that's been, how do I put it? If people are watching more short films online than feature films, we should center short film more in online film platforms, and the filmmakers should be financially compensated better for the short film they present on online platforms, because we're still stuck in the old model of cinema where the big feature films are the ones that get the big budgets and the big fees, and the short films are treated as like these little things that get just something to survive on, And I think it's time for that to be, reversed maybe. If really online is a short film is finding a lot of success online, I think it's up to us to find a way to, make that also a financial reality for the filmmakers, and promote it like short film is the center rather than still sticking to the big name directors and the big feature films. I think I've said enough, sorry.
No, it was very important, and you brought about something that I want to discuss more a bit later, the question of fees, the question of fairness in reciprocating the artists for their work. But also, because we were talking about these discrepancies in how the industry or industries treat features versus shorts, I think with short is also general uncharted territory, because there's no classic distribution system for shorts as it is for features. So besides festivals, you don't really know where to go, no? Because there are many new platforms, many new initiatives, but they're kind of closed off or a bit undergroundish. So maybe as a filmmaker, and especially as an emerging filmmaker, it's very hard to map all of them out and try to create a strategy, or to understand where you could try to propose your film, or how can your film get to be shown by more people. So I would go to you, Jade, as a distributor, to see if you have a bit of advice or insight on how to try to get these works to be seen more, especially when it comes to more ephemeral works, shorts that are made in between the visual arts and the film context.
Yeah, I found that it's difficult in general. Of course, once the festival route is ending, usually a year and a half, sometimes 2, it really depends on the film. We found that some films that have like specific topics can find their places in space that you wouldn't expect. Like, let's say you have a film about a certain neighborhood in one place, then somehow it will like grow in like community centers, and like we've seen that with some of our films that have to do with like really specific area. But if not, we found throughout the years that the best way to maximize the exposure is to create our own opportunity. So we decided we're just going to make a film festival with our films and you can come see them. Or we're going to work with like other associations that are closely related or that like that kind of film and try to really push forwards our film as much as possible. But it's difficult to find that openness, yeah, you have to get a bit creative, always. When your films are as creative as our films are, then you need to stretch it a bit and try to find new ways for the audience to encounter those films. And yeah, we tried a few different ideas, some successful, some not. But yeah, it's always a bit of a puzzle. It always depends on the film. Some films also do not find success in festivals because of their nature, because of the way they're made. They just don't really suit being in a program. But that doesn't mean that those films shouldn't be seen. They're also really interesting. They just don't really fit in that way. So then we look at other options. Like, can it be presented as an installation? Can it be presented sometimes like just in a public setting in a loop? Sometimes some films work well like that. But yeah, then we need to collaborate with other curators and make sure that those films are also seen.
And back to the idea of the curators as a bit of a gatekeepers, like it was, we were joking around yesterday in another panel. But Niels, you were mentioning the way you work at Kortfilmbe, which for me is a very good example of an online platform trying to be open, because you have your own editorial line, you do your own selection, but you try to open it up to new curators from different, working in different countries, contexts coming from different countries. So I think that could also open up a bit, the selection of films that you present, and not keep it as close off to your own editorial line, no? But I was curious, what are the challenges when programming this way for an online platform? Because even if you try to open it up as much as possible, I imagine that curating online for a worldwide audience comes with more restrictions than a film festival where you are set to a specific cinema, a specific, very limited audience. So even if you try to open it up and bring as many ideas as possible, do you have any limitations, and what are those?
The fact that we don't have a lot of money is a huge limitation. I mean, I say this specifically because even though we do have rights to the films for worldwide audiences, we have very little information about who our audience is, because we don't have the capacity or just the financial ability to look into these data and do the analysis of that. We don't know who's watching our films except for the ones that are. You can watch films either as a subscriber, or you can just rent a film for 3 days. And actually, people do this. We do have people who rent a short film and then watch it, and then have it for 3 days. If they want to rewatch it, they can. So we have a certain amount of data, but not enough. So this is one of the difficulties that we struggle with now as a platform. But I do think what you were saying before, the whole idea about inviting guest curators to have this dialogue with these films, or create a dialogue between these two films, I think is exactly the crux of the endeavor, I would say. Like, we want to open it up and find new ways to not only present these films, but also have these conversations around them. So I think the struggle still is to now find new audiences, and I guess that there's also a lot of competition now around. Like we were saying before, there's a lot of, you mentioned Le Cinema Club, who are doing an amazing job. I think I do wonder how they're paying the filmmakers. I have no channel probably, yeah, because that's a sponsor. Yeah, I know, but I don't know if that goes to filmmakers. I don't know if they pay this. They will. Probably they do. I'm just curious to see. Do they pay like a fixed screening fee for 1 week? How does that work? Because how we do it at Kortfilm is we don't have any minimum guarantee. We just have a revenue share where 50% goes to the filmmakers or the rights holders, and 50% goes to us. After deduction of all the costs, of course. So I'm bringing it up because I think it's interesting to have these conversations about how are we, financially rewarding the filmmakers and for their work. And on our end, we also create, texts around. We commission a writer who we pay, we commission a cast curator who we pay. So there's a lot of, that goes in from our end. We don't make a lot of money in the end of the day, presenting these films. We really do it for the passion of the art form or for the art form. But so yeah, if there's more information maybe in the room as well about screening fees for online platforms, I'm really interested to learn more about them because
it feels like it's not there's not like a basis to like calculate how much you should get from online exhibitors. That's what's a bit complicated. So it really depends on each platform as its own standard. So sometimes as a distributor, for me, it's hard to know, like, is this a good deal or not for the filmmaker? And oftentimes I think when you get money up front, this is a better deal because you know at least you're going to get that. Because if you, and not that this is a bad model at all, but if you just get the money from like 50, that's not a lot. But it's never a lot, even if you get money up front, from my experience. So
I would love to be able to pay at least the minimum, but it's just not possible the way we do it.
We were discussing a bit earlier, Julian, also about the opportunities that the art world offers for films, and maybe you could touch upon this fee discussion from your perspective of how are shorts welcomed in a museum context, because you're also mentioning it's a bit complicated to make a balance between audience and supporting filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice, I guess, it feels a bit strange to say it like that, but like where I see it go well is when artists are more flexible with showing where they can, in the sense that they're not aiming for the festival circuit, or aiming for just the art world or something. They're quite open about where they present their work, and that increases visibility and opportunities, of course, but it's also a survival tactic, right? Because not one doesn't offer like enough of a fee for an artist to just live off. So, any other opportunity, as long as you're okay with that institution's politics and everything, it makes sense to me. Saying that, there's this like obsession with exclusivity, especially in the film festival world. I particularly don't understand for the film festival circuit. You generally learn to navigate those. Right? It's like, for now at least, you don't have to worry about exhibition spaces and taking a premiere. You can just call the first film festival screening your premiere for now. I've seen artists, have multi-channel installations that they make a single screen version, and that also travels, and that kind of flexibility and fluidity, I think, has mostly gone well for young artists. You see resistance to that to generally older artists, I would say. Like, for example, Tacita Dean, I hear doesn't really, we know doesn't really show her work in cinema spaces, and she's very particular about like an analog film projection, but on a small scale. I understand you're used to seeing a work like this, and suddenly you're in a cinema, it's like massive, but you don't see that younger artists, I think, or early career artists have that rigidity, let's say. And that's the other thing with art. You get to have a bit more control as an artist over, how your work is presented. You can have specific requirements. Whereas in a festival, like I think many of you here have shown in a festival, but I doubt you knew the size of the screen before you entered the room, right? That's a very different situation. So they're very, different. There are differences, let's say. And as a programmer, I used to be able to say to artists, and throughout my career, I've worked with artists and have invited them into cinema spaces often. I've done both, but usually that's the route. And I was able to say, look, you're going to get better projection, better sound, focused audience. They'll see it from beginning to end, and there's an opportunity to discuss the film afterwards. And those things that historically haven't really been present in the art world, but from 10 years ago, I would say, you see 4K projection in Venice Biennale. That's not something every cinema can offer now. Better sound with subwoofers and stuff in exhibition spaces. So we've started to lose that in the cinema. It's no longer, I think, like the best place anymore. It's arguable now. But that focus and attention that the cinema space offers is still rare. Like, I don't know, the statistics of people watching video art in an exhibition space is quite depressing, to be honest. People spend like pretty much a minute maximum in front of a work, and you're very lucky if they saw the beginning, so you have to be realistic about those things. Another thing I was thinking about is, like you mentioned about films not fitting a film program. I think that's a really good point that online offers, like this focus on one film. You can do that on an online platform. Like this hot ticket film, that's the whole focus of that website, the Cinema Club, and it's a 3-minute film, And that would never work in the cinema space because like you're selling tickets for a 3-minute movie and people walk out, it doesn't work. So that's why cinemas have to build a film program to make it like worth the money or make it into like a program slot. And we're no longer shackled to that idea anymore because of the online opportunity. What we've lost, I think, is educational institutions paying for short film. Like if you talk with distributors who have existed for a long time working with art film, they said that was a big revenue source, that a university would hire rent a film print and project it, as part of their class, and they'll pay for that. But now, because of these films just being online, or filmmakers being easier to contact, and this educational setting being like for something good, so some people even waive the fee and stuff. I think that's dangerous because that was important revenue for the filmmaker and the distributor. So where possible, I think educational institutions should, they have a huge infrastructure with money. We see Harvard battling Trump. They have the money to do that. And Harvard do pay, not Harvard do pay artists when they present. But I'm saying educational institutions have more financial infrastructure and the possibility to pay, no matter what they say, than a small distributor or a small art space. So I think they should, if they're using short film for classes, start paying. And I've had experience in teaching, and short film is the best duration for teaching because you can, just put a short film on as part of your 2-hour class, and the students are there and they see the whole thing, and you discuss it. That's really difficult to do with feature films. So I think more and more short film should be, embedded in the, education, and if it does, there should be like a financial support coming from there towards distributors and short filmmakers, I think.
Talking about education, I think also, again shifting with my own hats, as somebody who worked for a long time in film education, I have the feeling that also talking about shifting media landscapes, we are dealing more and more with generations that have different attention spans, whose way of understanding images in cinema have been modeled by different channels and formats. So already I'm starting to feel that the short film format is taking, a bigger following, or that more audience is interested in this format because it's also more adapted to their habits of consuming media and cinema. So maybe that's also something to reflect upon at some point, that there is this decentering, this slow decentering of features, also in the way series are created. They are basically a collection of shorts, 20, 30 minutes episodes. So we're no longer in a paradigm where shorts are these eccentricities, these exercises that are left to the outskirts, just as for students to make or for artists to experiment with. And maybe, yeah, what you were mentioning is good to take into account that there is a way of learning to speak about cinema and think about cinema starting from shorts as a foremost example. But I would like to also give you a chance to ask some questions if you have them. Maybe it's very early still. Then maybe we can continue in this direction. How do you feel spectatorship has changed in the last years with all these new possibilities for watching films, like more personal reflections? How do you see it as programmers, as distributors, as consumers of cinema? Because you're already mentioning the statistics for watching films in a gallery setup. You were saying, Niels, that you don't have very clear information about the specificity of your audience, but maybe in general, from your experience as programmers, we can reflect a bit on that.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about now is for the work I do at the cinema. I think here in the Netherlands we've had the Cineville pass for quite a while, over a few years at least. It's just been introduced in Belgium, and we already see a huge change in terms of audience. I think the main takeaway is that there's a lot more younger people coming to see classic films, which I think is super exciting. I think we're probably all excited about that. And just for those who don't know, the Cineville, but it's just basically, I think you pay like 20 euros a month, and then you can use that to go watch films in all participating cinemas, and there's a lot of them, at least in Belgium, and I think in the Netherlands it's the same. So I think that's a huge, I mean, it's not tapping into the idea about short film being more online and all of that, but I think that's interesting to see that kind of shift, and I think we should continue to foster it. There was something else that I wanted to add, but now I forgot. Because we were saying about, yeah, and just maybe that's a sidebar, but because we're all more confronted with short films and moving images online, and mostly online, I would say, and I'm wondering if also these younger generations, I hope they are, but I'm not sure, are having all the ethical questions that come with it. Like, it will be easier probably to create new films yourself with new technologies, and maybe you should also mention AI, even though that's a whole different topic. But I'm always wondering, like, okay, there's more access to short film and moving images and images in general, but are we aware how we're using them? I'm not sure, as an individual, but also as a society. I think it's important that we have these ethical questions also again in educational environments such as schools, because it's so easy to just share something, not even knowing if it's real or not, etc., etc. Yeah, this is just something that also popped into my mind, which I think is super important to have this if we're talking about curating and programming and gatekeeping. So I'm wondering where these kind of conversations are happening. Here, that's good. I hope they're also happening elsewhere. Yeah. I don't know what else, maybe too much aside.
No, but it's really good to keep in mind, for sure, because, yeah, as distributor, it's always my concern that, yeah, our film don't leak in a way, like, or just find themselves like randomly on YouTube, and then filmmaker is not making any profit from it. That has not happened too much so far, but at my other job in Canada, it happened all the time because we had a collection that dated from the 70s. And then there was like very mythical short films in there, and they're constantly on YouTube, and you have to flag them. Not because you don't want them to be accessible, you want them to be accessible, but you want to make sure that the artist is getting something out of it because it's their work. So at Videopower we work a lot with like process-driven film and experimental film, and what I've noticed in terms of audience is that lately there's a bit more of like a, I don't know, like a, that people are more interested somehow. Even if you like it used to be that you had those circles that were really, really hardcore experimental film people, and it's like that's all they saw, that's all they wanted. And now I feel like there's a bit more of a blur, like they're still there, but they're not like the core audience anymore. Because the filmmakers also work in different way, they're not just doing analog glitch stuff, they're also doing other things. So that brings in like a bigger audience somehow. It's still a bit hard to convince people to like give those films a chance. Like they're not as like confusing and difficult as you think. And the moment you find one that will touch you, you'll understand. Like that's what you need. But yeah, I do see a lot of younger people being interested in the films we somehow. Maybe because they have an edginess to them and that's appealing. Younger crowd, I don't know. I hope so.
Or maybe they recognize more of the techniques and trends that we already interact with online. And that I think it's something that applies to some of our projects as well, being more connected to the contemporary issues, but also ways of representing the world. Do you have something to add?
Spectators. I mean, I echo what you said already, but I think it says something that young people who clearly know how to, navigate the internet and access these classic films, let's say, are choosing to come to the theater to watch it, right? Like, I think it's not yet, there's a lot of accusations around young people not having much of an attention span and all these things. Well, maybe that's not their fault, it's because the devices that they had access to like most of their lives, and maybe there's a yearning and a hunger for a place like a cinema that gives you that focus and attention that they don't get otherwise, and that's why we're seeing so many young people, which we do also at I, come to the theaters to see these classic films. And the other thing I want to say is I think it's really dangerous, from my perspective, to generalize or kind of identify too much of certain tendencies in like spectator behavior or something, because like once you start like programming to this idea of this like a spectator, you're really like cornering the possibilities of that program or your film, when it should be the other way. It should be open and inclusive, and if somebody takes the chance to come to the program, they should feel ideally welcomed and want to come back, right? So I do think we shouldn't cater too much to these like imaginatory ideas of an audience, and just make sure your program can be open and offer these entry points into a program, so they take the chance and come, and maybe there should be more of that in how short film is presented. I had a few things I wanted to say that I forgot to mention before, but so I'll just throw it in there in case it's interesting. But I was at this Loop Video Art Fair Symposium in November, and somebody presented on the realities of the art market. So if you come out of this panel thinking, okay, I'm going to go in the art world to enter the art market, here's the reality of the art market for film and video. It's 0.5% of the art market. It's that's the reality of the art market. So, admittedly, that's because paintings sell a lot, big money, and that's why it's 65%, I think, is painting still. But even though if you go to a biennial or some contemporary art museums today, you see a lot of video on display, it's not really like a illustration of the art market where things are being sold. So it is, I think, important to keep that in mind as well. And that's not because of the quality of the work, it's also because the art market is obsessed with objects that you can hold and have on display to your friends and stuff, right? And paintings cater well to that, and video really doesn't, because it's like a file on a computer. And galleries really admirably have tried to sell video as art objects, and found different ways to do that. Installations, or put this pen drive or hard drive into a nice looking box and stuff like that. But we've been dealing with this question of how to sell video art in the art world for like more than half a century now, and it's still a big struggle. So I don't want to be like, the art world is the best place to go with video works. It's more that I think it does open up opportunities like residencies, funds for artists to live off, things like that you can start tapping into that I don't think you see as much in the film world. In the film world, I think it's, unless you're like an editor, a producer, or a cinematographer who can jump from project to project. If you're like the director, it takes years to develop a project, even as a short film often. So, if you open your work up into those other worlds, you might be able to jump into this other opportunity that's more for artists here, and then jump into one more for film, and kind of have that mobility is what I wanted to say. Yeah, and the other thing, like, why do cinemas don't show as much short film? I want to just like break that down for you a little bit, right? So let's say you pay €100 for a short filmmaker for one short film. You can't sell that as a ticket, as I just explained, right? So you invite 5 short films. That's €500, right? That's already more expensive than like a feature film, like a classic feature. So there's that, and then you want to make it an event, as you often have to do with cinemas. So then okay, well, let's invite all the 4 or 5 short filmmakers. Okay, so you have to get them to travel over and accommodate them and feed them and pay them a speaker fee, maybe like it's going up, right? The fee. Whereas with a feature film, it's like one person, so maybe comparatively more manageable. So that's I think one of the reasons why short film struggles to find its place within like the cinema circuit, let's say. And what we have at I, we have this thing called Curator Film Pool, where we, with a subscription fee every year, a cinema can be subscribed and screen any of the short films in the collection, and the filmmakers are compensated. And that has worked in a sense, because it's a bit more catered towards the cinemas, let's say. Like maybe they don't have the kind of capacity, both financially and practically, to be reaching out to short filmmakers and doing that research. But if it's a smaller collection, and you have the subscription service, it makes it easier, and they start programming short films before features, things like that. So that's one way we're exploring. Individual mainly, yeah. I think we've done pre-programmed as well, though, like a body of work by a filmmaker, things like that. Usually tied with the restorations from our collection. So yeah, that's one model I wanted to throw in that I've seen more. Yeah. Sorry, I totally detoured from the spectator question.
I think it's actually perfect, because it's the perfect conclusion for our conversation, and bringing it a bit back to maybe your more specific needs, because I think the idea for us with this conversation was to show or reflect a bit on the possibilities for short films besides festival. You have finished a project, it had a festival run. What do you do with it afterwards? Because actually, as we are trying to state here at European Short Pitch, shorts are important, shorts matter in the film industry. And yeah, it's good that new opportunities appear. It's good to reflect on the ones that exist and can be improved. And I think that should go on both sides, not only the curators or distributors, but also filmmakers trying to understand a bit their place and to stand for their own rights and needs, in terms of fees, in terms of visibility. So yeah, it's a longer conversation that we can continue maybe during our breaks today. But I want to thank you very, very much for joining us. Niels and Jade will also be around for the one-to-one meetings today. And Julian's activity you can follow at I, because he cannot stay longer today. And my colleagues asked me to tell you a few important things. First of all, there is coffee and water waiting for you in our break room, which is the arena just next door. We kindly ask you to go there in the next 15 minutes while we prepare the room for the one-to-one meetings. And then the projects will be separated into chat for our participants to know perfectly where you at. And we have signs on the door for our professionals if you need to help you orientate better to find the meetings that you already have in your agenda. That's it. See you in 15 minutes at the